The United Nations International Convention Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination of 1965 is a treaty that is enforceable by domestic and international law. And it mandates a few things. Number one, to regard racial discrimination as a crime. And number two, to prohibit and bring to an end all organizations that incite and promote racial discrimination. Now, religious organizations including Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, and Judaism operating in jurisdictions under all UN member states are in clear violation of the convention, as these religious organizations incite racial discrimination, resulting in acts of terror, bigotry, and poverty, and the denial of legal rights to the religious minority. Under Article 2, each state party shall prohibit and bring to an end, by all appropriate means, including legislation as required by circumstances, racial discrimination by any person, group, or organization. Under Article 4, all UN party members who sign this convention shall declare illegal and prohibit organizations, including religious, how they organize and their propaganda activities. So I petition all UN member states and the United Nations to put all mainstream religious organizations on trial who practice and teach propaganda and policies that instigate and promote racism. In addition, to hold all UN member states legally accountable for failure to prosecute religious organizations for their promotion of racism. In addition, former UN member states, including Taiwan, who signed this convention, are still legally bound to uphold it, despite no longer being a UN member state, and should be held accountable internationally in these regards. Now, it's a very pointed fact that religious organizations have instigated racism internationally. You don't have to take my word for it. Simply turn on the 6 o'clock news. And when you see all of these global conflicts taking place, they have a common denominator, right? It's based on racism. It's based on racism. You know, where the majority will persecute and oppress the minority. And they do it under the guise of law, misapplication of law, but its root is religious creed. Its root is religious creed. And so therefore, these religious organizations who are heavily involved in politics, despite that also being illegal by those who signed the Treaty of 1966 as UN member states, and unfortunately, because of that, the world is in chaos. It's in chaos. And this is one of the reasons why this recommendation is so urgent for all UN member states to seriously take into consideration in order to eliminate the threat to peace and security, in order to bring about the clear objectives of the UN. And I know that there are many people here that are not, I mean, we're all older. Let's be honest. But, back in 1914, the world really felt that they were on the threshold of a utopia. They felt that they were on the threshold of achieving world peace back in 1914. And I would say speak to some of the experts, but none of them are alive anymore. But if you go back and do some research by some of the experts who were around then, they'll tell you that when the world spun out of control after the start of World War I, it feels like no one has gotten a break since. And one of the things that has not been addressed ever internationally, ever, it's not been addressed. It's not been fixed. Is holding these individuals finally legally responsible and accountable for their actions. And when I say these individuals, these organizations, these religious organizations that continue to stand behind their propaganda so as to incite terrorism and hatred and bigotry internationally without consequence. Nevertheless, those days are over because legally, all countries are required by law to prosecute these religious organizations. They're required by law, by the treaty that they signed, to prosecute these religious organizations for their hand in promoting racism. In addition to that, they are also legally bound by law to remove their tax-free status because they're in violation of another UN treaty that prohibits religious organizations from being politically involved. And so by law, all UN member states are legally responsible for prosecuting these religious organizations. Now, it would be a lot easier for UN member states just to give their power and authority to the United Nations and then allow the United Nations to hold trial and prosecute and work on the process of eliminating these threats internationally. Now, that just makes sense, right? You know, that just makes it. It's a good business move. It's just a good move. And so that is the recommendation that I presented on the floor to the UN back in November of 2021, and that is a recommendation that I am presenting to the UN today, going into 2022. All right. So I want to thank you for taking some time to listen to this podcast. Now, this information is also going to be available online everywhere. It's going to be available on Court Magazine. It's going to be available on BuzzFeed, as well as some other international publications that I have been fortunate enough to partner with just to make sure that this gets out. Also, for all of you UN Party member states who are listening to this or who received the email from me, thank you so much for receiving it, and thank you so much for your correspondence. I really appreciate just the opportunity to work with all of you to make sure that this gets done legally, and of course, obviously, you know, it's something that needs to be done. And I appreciate the opportunity to work with you in these regards as well. Okay, so that being stated, I hope that you all have an amazing, amazing week. And we look forward to things changing in 2022 internationally because the time has come. Until next time, stay safe. Already.